The bustling corridors of the hospital echoed with the sounds of beeping machines and hurried footsteps, the usual symphony of a busy emergency room. Dr. Emma stood at the nurse's station, flipping through patient files when her pager buzzed. It was Mr. Thompson, critical condition after a car accident. As she entered his room, she found him lying in bed, a scowl etched on his face. Mr. Thompson, a man in his late 60s, had built a reputation over the years as a difficult patient, his bigotry often spilling out in racist and derogatory remarks. He was known to belittle staff, questioning their abilities based on their race or gender. Dr. Emma, a woman of color, had heard the stories, but she was determined to do her job with grace and professionalism. "You're the doctor?" Mr. Thompson sneered, eyeing her suspiciously as she approached his bed. "I don't know how you people got into medicine, but let's hope you're actually good at it." Dr. Emma took a deep breath, pushing aside the sting of his words. With a steady voice, she introduced herself, setting aside her emotions to focus on the task at hand. She had a patient to save, and that was all that mattered. Mr. Thompson's condition was worse than anticipated. He had been involved in a severe car accident, and upon arrival at the hospital, his injuries were immediately deemed life-threatening. He had sustained multiple broken ribs, internal bleeding, and a collapsed lung. His vital signs were unstable, and he needed emergency surgery, fast. Dr. Emma, ever the calm and focused professional, quickly assessed the situation and took charge of his care. As she and the team worked to stabilize him, Mr. Thompson remained conscious, his eyes narrowing with distrust as he looked at her. "What is this?" he groaned, his voice strained but loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "They're letting a woman handle me? How's she going to save my life?" Dr. Emma didn't flinch. She motioned for the nurse to administer pain relief and proceeded with the necessary tests. Yet Mr. Thompson's remarks didn't stop. Every move Dr. Emma made was met with a snide comment. "Is this even legal?" he mocked, glaring at the young nurse assisting her. "Are you sure you know what you're doing? I'd rather have a real doctor, not some whatever you are." Despite the hostility, Dr. Emma stayed focused, determined to save him, her mind fixed solely on the task at hand. Dr. Emma worked tirelessly, her hands steady despite the pressure of the emergency surgery. The operating room was filled with tension as she carefully repaired the damage to Mr. Thompson's internal organs. Hours passed, but she remained focused, her mind not swayed by his previous insults. She had one goal: to save his life. After the surgery, Dr. Emma stayed by his side, overseeing his recovery. She adjusted his medications, monitored his vital signs, and made sure every detail was attended to with precision. Slowly, his condition began to stabilize. The initial signs of internal bleeding were under control, and the swelling in his lungs had reduced. By the third day, he was alert and breathing on his own. However, despite the progress, Mr. Thompson showed little gratitude. His words were still laced with disdain. "Guess I'm alive, but I'm not sure how that happened with someone like you in charge." His dismissive tone stung, but Dr. Emma didn't let it break her focus. She continued to provide the highest level of care, knowing her professionalism was the only response to his bitterness. As he grew stronger, the tension in the room thickened, his prejudice a silent barrier between them, one Dr. Emma couldn't easily erase. During a routine checkup, Dr. Emma received an unexpected shock. As she reviewed Mr. Thompson's medical records, she noticed an odd discrepancy, a mix-up with another patient's file. Curious, she dug deeper, finding a surprising connection. Mr. Thompson's estranged daughter was listed in the records as a prominent civil rights advocate, someone who had publicly criticized his bigoted views in numerous interviews and articles. She had long denounced his discriminatory actions, even describing him as a significant obstacle in her mission to fight for racial equality. The revelation hit Dr. Emma hard. She had been unaware of the personal history Mr. Thompson carried, but now, the pieces started falling into place. She began to piece together his past from his medical history and a few conversations with staff. It became clear that his bigotry wasn't born overnight. Raised in an abusive household where hate was taught as survival, Mr. Thompson had adopted these beliefs as armor against the world. His father, an alcoholic who used violence to control, had instilled a deep sense of fear and distrust in people who were different. Dr. Emma's heart softened as she realized the pain behind Mr. Thompson's harsh words, understanding that his prejudices were not simply the product of hatred, but of deep, unresolved trauma. One afternoon, as Mr. Thompson's recovery continued, Emma found herself standing by his bedside, the weight of what she had uncovered pressing on her conscience. She had always believed in treating the whole person, not just the patient before her, and now it was time to address the elephant in the room. "Mr. Thompson," she began gently, her voice calm but firm, "I know about your daughter. She's a civil rights advocate, someone who has spent years speaking out against the views you've expressed." His face tightened, a mixture of anger and defensiveness flashing across his features. "You don't know anything about her," he spat. "She's turned against me." Dr. Emma remained patient, taking a slow breath. "She didn't turn against you. She's fighting for a cause she believes in, and the things you say, your prejudice, it hurts her. It's caused a rift, not just with her, but with many people around you." His eyes wavered, something shifting behind his hardened exterior. For the first time, Mr. Thompson's anger seemed to falter, and in its place, a flicker of regret appeared. I never meant to hurt her," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The realization of his actions, the years of lost opportunities for reconciliation, hit him hard. Regret filled him, and for the first time he was willing to confront the damage his bigotry had caused, not just to others, but to his own family. As days passed, the change in Mr. Thompson was undeniable. His once stubborn, defensive demeanor had softened, replaced by a genuine vulnerability that he had never allowed himself to feel before. One evening, as Dr. Emma checked on him, he spoke up quietly, his voice tinged with remorse. "I've spent so many years holding on to this hatred, this bitterness, but it's cost me everything, my daughter, my life, my dignity. I don't want to be that man anymore." Dr. Emma listened intently, her heart going out to him. "It's never too late to change, Mr. Thompson. But change takes work. You can't undo the past, but you can make things right from here on out." He nodded, his eyes welling with emotion. "I want to make amends with my daughter. Please, can you help me?" Dr. Emma agreed, offering her support as he began reaching out to his daughter, penning a heartfelt letter to begin the healing process. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson made a bold decision. He sought therapy to confront his past, attending sessions to unlearn his deeply ingrained prejudices. It wasn't easy, but with each step he felt himself becoming a different man, one who could finally look beyond the walls of his own pain and hatred, and embrace a chance at redemption. The day of the reunion arrived, and Mr. Thompson stood nervously outside a cafe, his heart pounding. His daughter, Elizabeth, had agreed to meet him, but there was no guarantee of forgiveness. When she arrived, their eyes met, hesitant yet hopeful. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," Mr. Thompson said, his voice shaking. "But I want you to know, I'm sorry. I've been a terrible father, and I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. I've spent my whole life being wrong, and I want to change." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment there was silence. Finally she spoke. "It's going to take time, but I'm willing to try. I just need to see that you mean it." They sat together, talking for hours. Slowly, cautiously, they began to rebuild the relationship that had been broken for so long. The journey to healing wasn't easy, but it had begun. Dr. Emma, watching from a distance, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had saved a life, but more than that, she had witnessed the transformation of a man who had once been consumed by hate. She understood now that her work was never just about physical healing. Sometimes, it was about helping people confront their pasts and giving them a chance at redemption. Months later, the air was filled with a sense of hope as Mr. Thompson stood beside his daughter, Elizabeth, at a community event. The venue was bustling with energy, people laughing, sharing stories, and celebrating the progress of social justice initiatives. It was a world Mr. Thompson had once rejected, but now, standing shoulder to shoulder with Elizabeth, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. As the speeches began, Elizabeth took the stage to share her work advocating for racial equality, her voice unwavering as she spoke of forgiveness and healing. Mr. Thompson stood at the back, his hands trembling slightly, but his heart was full. He watched her with pride, seeing not just the woman she had become, but the daughter he was beginning to understand. After the speech, They walked through the crowd together. Mr. Thompson found himself engaging in conversations he never thought possible, speaking openly about his past and the change he had undergone. People listened, not with judgment, but with understanding. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the event, Mr. Thompson turned to Elizabeth and said, "I never thought I'd be here. But I'm glad I am." For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. A new beginning, one built on acceptance, change, and love.